Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Tyson Fury versus Arslanbek Makhmudov fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content and I will try my best to get out there for you guys. I appreciate all the support in which I've had with it so far, and of course the link will be in the description. Let's get straight into this one, and this was a random fight to hear when it was first rumoured. I mean, there was no surprise hearing that Fury was back out of retirement, but I felt like this was just a bit of a unexpected opponent, and as I did think that he would only really come back for another real kind of big name fight like a Usyk or possibly a Joshua, or maybe the winner of like a Dubois Wardley, but that was kind of unlikely really. Like I say, it was mainly just going to be a Usyk or a Joshua in my opinion. But it's interesting to see that he's come back for what is a bit of a tune-up fight on paper, but it was still a very dangerous opponent in Makhmudov. And it's interesting, it shows that he's kind of being a little bit more smart in that way with his career. Obviously he's had a bit of time out through retirement and, well, the so-called retirement, and now of course he's back. It is just a break at the end of the day, it's not retirement. But again, this is him in a new position where he's never had to be in before, where he's had to have this kind of comeback fight from back-to-back losses. So again, it's going to be interesting to see where mentally he's at. I feel like it's been promoted well, and the more it's been promoted, the more I feel like it does make sense on paper. A good world level known name who will allow Fury to be the centre of attention on Netflix, and I'm sure also get him a lot of money as well. And again, I feel like these are the kind of things in which Fury was looking for a return fight. He needed that next Netflix card to really, excite him to come back. And I'm sure with Netflix now being involved, the money is going to be great. And every heavyweight that gets involved with Netflix, and any fighter that gets involved with Netflix, I'm sure they're going to get paid well. And it wouldn't surprise me if, plenty more fighters start fighting with Netflix now, the likes of, Anthony Joshua, even the real kind of guys like Alexander Usyk, the real top guys like that who are at the absolute best of their careers, they can all end up on Netflix at some point, and it really wouldn't surprise me. And also, I suppose, though, something that I'm not sure about for this fight is I'm not sure how well the tickets are actually selling. There was obviously the whole thing that kicked off with John Fury in the presser with him and Carl Froch, and I think that could have been just him trying to create a bit more hype for the fight because the tickets weren't budging as well. Again, that could be the case. Obviously, Fury's a big name in himself, but against Makhmudov, it's not really the biggest and best of fights, really. And when you're in London, you've got, plenty of options in which you could go and watch fights, and big fights as well. I mean, we have Wardley Dubois in London soon, which is a real big fight, and I think that's actually sold pretty well. So again, there does seem to be a difference, and I think the fans are actually starting to really, not just bite on the name of a Fury. Again, it might be selling really well, I don't really know, but I'm hearing also rumours that the tickets have also dropped in price a bit as well. Again, that could and often is due to the tickets not selling as well as what promoters are expecting. And I mean, talking about promoters, it's also interesting to see that Gold Star is the main promoter of this card. Obviously, Gold Star Spencer Brown is with Tyson Fury and has pushed him throughout all his career, but Tyson Fury is technically signed with Queensberry, and Queensberry have had problems with Seller and Zuffa and everything like that and don't really want to work with them. So to see that Queensberry is involved, but Seller and Zuffa are less involved, and technically the main promoter is Gold Star, is interesting. That must have been some sort of thing that they worked out with Queensberry, so that these lawsuits wouldn't progress more, because of course Frank Warren did actually put out a lawsuit on Seller and Zuffa through, I'm pretty sure, the makings of this fight and maybe a couple others. So again, it is just interesting to see that Gold Star is the main promoter. And it also surely does mean, I know this is a little bit of a tangent I'm going off here, surely that does mean that the Conor Benn fight, which, is him with his supposed one fight deal, which is, a big money deal for just one fight, isn't technically with Zuffa or Seller, and that is, and imagine, in the contract. I've heard Eddie Hearn kind of mention this a little bit. I don't know if anything's going to progress with that, but I just find that that's interesting as well, and the technical, things in which are always going on in the background in boxing. Fury is obviously coming off 2 losses to Usyk, and with him now being out of the ring for over a year, I mean, he's only 37 years old, which I say only, yes, is on, the latter side of his career. I'd imagine he won't have too many more fights before he actually retires, but I suppose you never really know. But for a heavyweight nowadays, 37 isn't actually that old, and you do feel like Fury's been around the sport for ages. So again, 37 isn't really that old, and we've got Alexander Usyk who's in the prime, and I'm pretty sure he's 38 now. So it's really not that of a real kind of significant factor, his age, I don't believe. Again, it will be interesting to see if there's any kind of ring rust coming off 2 losses and, like say, having that break. To have lost twice to Usyk could have definitely affected Fury the same way in which it did Joshua, which was, mentally, and due to Usyk just making you so hesitant to commit with his movement and his just, such smart to high fight IQ. So it will be interesting to see how he kind of mentally is in the fight, and also how heavy he comes in as well. He did look big in the second fight with Usyk, but I don't actually think he was significantly heavier than in the first fight. He just looked it a bit more, in my opinion. I think also, trying to grow out his beard and stuff like that as well, did seem to make him look a bit older and a bit heavier. And again, he did look a little bit hesitant at times to commit the same way from, of course, him actually getting hurt in the first fight against Usyk. But he also has been seen to overlook opponents in the past, and that's definitely a thing that could come into play in this fight. I mean, of course, everybody remembers the Ngannou fight for Fury, where he definitely overlooked him, and he came in very heavy for that fight. I think about 20 pounds over the heavyweight amount in which he came in the second Usyk fight. So again, he came in very heavy in that fight and just didn't really seem to care. And obviously, he almost lost that fight, or arguably did lose that fight. So again, it's going to be interesting to see if he comes in more focused from what happened in the Ngannou fight, or if he is, had that retirement time and he's gained a few pounds and he's not really, burnt it off the same way. Again, it will be interesting to see. And really, for Tyson Fury, obviously he's a huge name and he's always in really big fights, but he hasn't had a good win in a while. His, most recent good win is against Dillian Whyte in 2022, and obviously, Dillian Whyte since then hasn't really done anything of interest that's good. I mean, he had a couple fights, but then he got stopped badly against the Talma last time out. So, it's been a while since we've seen Tyson really go out there and put on a real good performance where he's been able to beat a high-level fighter. I mean, obviously before that he fought Deontay Wilder, which was, the most exciting moments really with Fury in his career, bar, maybe also Klitschko fight being up there as well. But that Dillian Whyte fight was the last one, which was a good stoppage win for him, but then he went on to fight, of course, Chisora, which was a boring fight in which nobody really cared or wanted to see. Then he went on to the Ngannou fight, which, of course, he really didn't look the best. And then he had his 2 Usyk fights where, of course, he lost. So, again, we just haven't seen him at his best for a while. Whereas, Makhmudov possibly might be starting to change a bit as a fighter and starting to regain a bit more momentum in his career. Again, I don't know. Makhmudov, I'm sure, did actually gain a lot more attention as a fighter, especially from UK fans after beating Dave Allen last time out in Sheffield. Again, that could be a reason as to why they made Makhmudov as an opponent, because of course fans are now more, starting to realise who he is compared to some other top heavyweights who may be, a good prospect from wherever he's from, but isn't as known in the UK because they haven't fought there. Makhmudov, was in a sold-out Sheffield last time, and he was able to go out there and get a win. So again, he's more known as a fighter now. He is still a contender in the division, of course. He, of course, had his kind of 2 TKO losses prior to the fight with Allen, but I'm sure this is going to be a great payday for him, which, I mean, taking the fight, you got to respect it. It is definitely the biggest step up he's had since his Caballero fight, which obviously did not go well for him at all, with him getting stopped brutally with body shots, and so that really did derail the hype of him as a prospect. But again, he might be changing his style and starting to develop a little bit more at this point. It does look like possibly that is the case. He may not be as destructive and as scary as he once was when he was on his come up before the Cabello, before the Vianello, before the even Dave Allen fights, where he didn't really damage Dave Allen all that much. Obviously, Allen's always been known for being very tough, but Makhmudov was landing big punches, and they did seem to have a good effect, but they didn't ever seem to actually visibly hurt or stunt Dave Allen all too much. So again, this power in which we once saw as destructive and scary isn't, what it once was, and we've actually started to see a bit more of him as a character now, as a personality, to see, that he isn't as scary of a being as I suppose he does visibly look with his face. But to speak about both fighters individually skill-wise, Fury as a fighter, I believe he uses his jab well. That's something in which he's always done with his reach. It's a nice kind of fast, snappy jab, which again, the speed in which he does have for the size in which he is has always been something that's impressive. He, of course, we've seen on multiple occasions be able to recover from being hurt and severely hurt. Of course, the Deontay Wilder fights, we saw that. We saw that against Francis Ngannou when he got dropped, and also against Alexander Usyk in the first fight where he was taking some big punches and ended up getting a standing 8 count, which could have actually, not been a standing 8 count and actually could have been, him getting knocked out. But of course he was able to go on and get through the rest of the fight with that happening. And again, that's not something in which you want to have happen all the time, but it's a good recovery strategy there to be able to compose himself and get back to his work. He's got good timing with his punches. Even against Usyk, he was able to time nice shots on him at points. He whips in good body shots again. In the first fight, against Usyk, he seemed to actually be able to damage him once or twice with a good body shot, and that's interesting as well. He is pretty consistently accurate with his work as well. Obviously, against Usyk, there was times where he was struggling with the accuracy through Usyk's evasive movement, but against most heavyweights like Makhmudov, who kind of are just in front of you, his accuracy is pretty good and consistent in that way. He works off his jab well. Again, like I've mentioned, he uses his reach fully. He knows when to plant his feet as well when he wants to stick in a bit more of a powerful punch. He's got good feints when he uses them as well, and that's normally when he's at a bit of a lower weight. He doesn't use them as much when he's at that heavier of a weight. He doesn't get discouraged as well, again kind of shown through the punishment in which he was taking from Usyk, which I imagine was quite embarrassing for him. And he did seem to, like I say, try and come back with moments to still make the fight somewhat competitive. And he's able to find angles around people's guards with his hooks and longer punches, especially because he does kind of use a lot of the reach in his hooks, which can be a bit wide. And can leave some openings through the middle, but again do seem to be able to go around any kind of guard quite well. Negatives about him: he's flat-footed for the most part, so again his movement isn't really all too much. He definitely overlooks opponents. He can be too comfortable in fights for sure. He struggles against movers, and if he can't kind of pin you down with his jab, again, he can struggle a bit there. Handling explosiveness and a high output as well, both of them things can kind of disrupt him, and Makhmudov will commit to punches in a somewhat explosive way before he kind of tries to smother you, so again, that can maybe catch him out. He can sit on the ropes for too long as well, and that was how he ended up getting caught in the first fight against Usyk, where he was just caught on the ropes by a big shot by just staying there. He doesn't really have the best of head movement. He tries to use bits at times when he's in kind of an excited mood, but for the most part, there's not really kind of a natural amount there. He throws a lot in singles. He drops his hands often. He doesn't really respect enough his opponents, I don't believe, which again can lead him to getting caught far too much and just kind of fighting opponents' fights. He can follow you around the ring as well, and he actually does, I feel, struggle to make you fight his fight. Again, if it's a style like a Chisora where he's going to have to try and get in range and stuff like that, and he really can't do that much, he was just going to piece him up and, have a lot of success at a range. But if it was like the Deontay Wilder fights, he was just going toe-to-toe and swinging at the end of that fight, and it was, really exciting, but it wasn't really getting back to what would work for him, which was the jab. And again, against Usyk, he did struggle to really impose himself to slow down Usyk at all. Makhmudov, as a fighter, he does carry power. Of course, we haven't seen that more recently in the David Allen fight, but of course, we have seen him get some pretty destructive knockouts in the past. He can work off his jab pretty well, and when he keeps the fight long, which is something in which I've seen him actually start to do a bit more against Allen, which I was quite happy with. He was actually able to have a bit more success, and he was committing to a nice straight shot after his jab, which was coming with a decent bit of power as well, and really kind of did push through any kind of guard, which was nice against Allen as well. He does jab low to come high with a nice hook, and when he does that, that's nice as well. And I feel like in general, he's not got bad punch selection, especially when it is at a bit more of a range. But even in close, he can work a nice uppercut through as well, which is actually a bit of an underrated weapon from him. When he uses combinations on the ropes, when he's actually getting stuck on the ropes, he can actually work you coming into range and have success. And that was inevitably what was happening against Allen, where Allen was just plodding in and he was getting caught coming in a lot from Makhmudov, and that was working well. Negatives about him: he's been hurt to the body. Obviously, against Caballero, he was pretty destructively hurt to the body, and that just wasn't good for him. And Fury probably is going to try and hurt him to the body. He can definitely smother his work and be very wild and wide with his punches as well, but he does seem to be a little bit more disciplined in his work and actually slowing things down a bit, which could be a bit of a negative because he might be slowing it down a bit too much, but it did seem to work well going into the later rounds against Allen, where he did still have a little bit left to give, where everybody was kind of saying that Makhmudov wouldn't make it past, the first 6 rounds without being completely exhausted. He did have enough still to give in them final rounds, even though he was kind of staying on the ropes. He can stay in range too long when he's on the offensive. He's not really that fast in, hand speed and in movement. His footwork is very messy. He doesn't really use any kind of defensive footwork, and he can just forget his defense altogether with a very open guard for the most part. He stands tall, he's flat-footed, he can sit on the ropes like I mentioned. He wants a slow pace. I think at this point with his style that he's trying to develop, he wants a slow pace, whereas before, when he was being the destructive fighter on the come-up, he was trying to blitz you in the first few rounds. Obviously that didn't work for him against Caballero or Vianello, so now he's seeming like he wants to actually slow down the pace, and he doesn't always make the space that I feel like he needs to throw in close to be able to get these sometimes wider shots through, and he also can be backed up later on the ropes, just like say waiting there and sitting there trying to walk you onto stuff. And if he's doing that against Fury isn't just going to plod in, he is just going to keep a range, and I just don't know if it'll work out that well for him just sitting on the ropes. Obviously Fury sits on the ropes, but Makhmudov just seemed to welcome that a bit more in the later rounds against Allen. Who do I think is going to win this fight? I think that Tyson Fury is going to win via a unanimous decision. I think it's going to be pretty comfortable for him for the most part. He could get caught out of a few power punches from Makhmudov if he uses them, straights a bit more and actually keeps a bit of a range and, tries to explode in at times and tries to smother him. Again, that could catch him out, but for the most part, I think Fury, even with him coming off 2 losses, will be able to jab, time him pretty comfortably, with, like I said, the minimal defense in which Makhmudov has. And when Makhmudov into them later rounds starts to back off, again, I think Fury's just going to have success more comfortably at a range, as he's been that range type of fighter for a longer part of his career than what Makhmudov has been trying to develop that into his style. So again, I think it's going to be a pretty comfortable unanimous decision victory for Fury. And then we can go on to fight next. I mean, obviously, like I mentioned, there's only really big names that he's going to fight, I feel like, at this point. I don't think he is going to have another comeback type of fight. So I think he'll either fight Usyk again. Usyk has mentioned him as a name, but I think he wants to fight, he's fighting Verhoeven. Then I think he wants to fight the winner of Dubois Wardley, but if he doesn't, then he could fight Fury again. That has been a name in which Usyk has mentioned. Of course, the fight in which everybody wants to see for the longest time, which is Joshua versus Fury, which we've heard talks of a September possible date, but again, I've not really got my hopes up at all. Or possibly, if Dubois beats Wardley, then that could be a fight that might tempt Fury. I mean, if Dubois beats Wardley, only because Dubois obviously been stopped from Usyk and has been stopped, in previous times as well from Joe Joyce in the past as well. So he's showing them vulnerabilities, and obviously, if he's able to go out there and beat Wardley and become a world champion again, that could excite Fury to try and come back and fight for a world title. And like I say, seeing them vulnerabilities there from Dubois as a fighter who has been hurt in the past, who is, a pretty big name for his fights with Joshua and everything else as well. So again, that could be something in which he might find interesting. Only, I think, if that is for a world title. I don't think he would fight Wardley if Wardley beats Dubois, just because Wardley hasn't shown so far the same kind of level of weaknesses where he has been brutally stopped as what Dubois was against Usyk. To speak about now the co-main event fight. Of course, this card's a pretty good card. There's a couple good heavyweight fights on it. Riatpour vs TKV is a decent fight for the British title. And then Justice Huni versus Fraser Clark is an interesting one. Fraser Clark could lose that one badly. But another fight, which of course I've kind of mentioned already, has had a lot of drama around it. And that is, of course, Conor Benn versus Regis Prograis. Benn has by far been the biggest stir up in the boxing world from Zuffa Boxing so far, with him leaving Matchroom, who of course has helped him so much through his career to go where the money is, really. I mean, it was a very shocking moment for all the fans. I think Matchroom and Eddie Hearn was shocked from it as well. And obviously, Eddie Hearn has talked about lending money to Benn. Benn is like for legal fees when he was going through all the drug issues. Obviously, Benn has said that he was never lent money and everything like that. And so, and also the fact that Matchroom was with Benn from the very start of his career, like I said, defended him wholeheartedly throughout all of that drug, issues, and which never really got fully resolved. And, could still be a thing in which, he did actually just test positive for, but he had him and, was very defensive of him the entire time, took him through both of the Eubank fights and was, there in his corner both times taking shit from Eubank. But, now he's just gone where the money is. So from the sounds of the way that he did leave, it wasn't good, and it will be interesting to see what will happen when him and Eddie meet, because it's inevitable they will meet at some point. But at the same time, boxing is definitely a cutthroat sport, and you are only relevant for a short amount of time in your career, so to chase the money does make sense. It's no surprise that Conor Benn, he is a money fighter. We've seen him fight, Eubank both times for a lot of money, and obviously, he wasn't really too bothered about going to any other fights at that point, and, really, he's never really gone through, the real tough fights before that. Obviously, he fought Chris Algieri, but that was a big name, and that probably, was one of the best money options at the time for him, but it wasn't, him at a good point in his career, Algieri. And then he had some comeback fights which were against, undefeated on paper, but again, at the same time, just not really the best type of fighters. So, he's never really fully tested himself in a fight which is, a non-money fight for him. Of course, his name's always helped him with that. And again, it's clear that he does just want to be in the sport for money, which is shown at this point. The legacy thing, I feel like, isn't really the case. I don't know how things are going to work for him getting a title shot now, though, with Zuffa. Of course, Zuffa are trying to have their new title and everything like that. So, again, I don't know how it's going to work if, Zuffa are going to sign the likes of like a Romero or a Garcia, which wouldn't surprise me, but obviously we've now seen for Opetaya, they're most likely going to be forced to vacate their title. So, are fighters really going to want to do that with Zuffa? I don't know. Conor, obviously, in his last fight with Eubank, did look much better the second time around, sticking to a game plan, not getting drawn into as much of a fight. But Eubank did look very bad in that fight. He looked weak. He looked like he had nothing really to give. Again, that could have been through weight cut, that could have been through various other things like the first fight having a big effect on him or anything else. He won't have to worry about as much built-up aggression towards Prograis in this fight, I don't believe. Obviously, there was a lot of back and forths between him and Eubank, but again, you still can't overlook and get drawn into a scrap with Prograis, because Prograis is a hard puncher. I don't think Prograis is a shot fighter, but I'm not sure if this is much of a step up at this point for Conor compared to Eubank. I don't think Prograis is really much better in my opinion. He has had a comeback win against Diaz last time out, which was alright, but again, Diaz is a bit of a journeyman opponent at this point. But he did kind of get dominated by Cattrall, even though he was able to get a knockdown. Cattrall knocked him down twice after in the later rounds, and Cattrall's never really been known as much of a power puncher, so again, to see Cattrall really damage Prograis was interesting, and Haney dropped him as well in their fight, which Haney dominated for sure. I feel like A fight with Catterall for Benn would have made more sense for the UK fans, to actually build a bit more hype in that way. But obviously, we've seen Catterall now go down a different route, with now fighting Giasov, with Benn fighting Prograis, and with Prograis also being 8 years older than Benn, being 37. Of course, that's a factor which I feel like is definitely going in Benn's favour. But of course, Prograis is a former world champion. You can argue his run as a world champion really wasn't the best. I mean, he started off good, winning the vacant title against Zepeda, but Zepeda obviously went on, a downward bit of a spiral afterwards. And then, he signed with Matchroom. He fought Zarria, which was, meant to be a bit of an easy fight for him. I think Zarria came in on short notice because it was meant to be Paro from my memory as well. And Zarria got into a very close split decision fight where Prograis arguably could have lost that fight. Then he fought Haney straight away, trying to bank in the money, I feel like, with, whilst he still had the title, lost convincingly, like I mentioned, then lost to Catterall as well. So, as a world champion, he was just never really the best of world champions, to be honest. He just has that on his record. There is a weight factor for both of these fighters, with Conor now coming down from this kind of couch weight in which he had with the Eubank. And Prograis now moving up from welterweight from super lightweight division. Could be interesting to see if the power is a bit more there with Prograis and if he can take a punch a bit better. Both are going to commit to power punches, and if Benn goes to war like he can do and what we have seen him do, he could definitely get caught. I don't feel like Benn is a complete fighter at all. Again, he has shown improvements, but there is still, issues there with his style where he does, he can get caught more than he probably wants to. Benn did look more explosive of his back foot in the last fight against Eubank. Like I mentioned, he showed more discipline, disengaging from exchanges often, but this definitely could be the most powerful puncher Benn's faced yet, which would be definitely interesting to see if he gets caught by Prograis, how he deals with that. But again, we've seen Catterall drop Prograis with similar shots in which I feel like Benn's going to land with not as much power as I feel like Benn's going to land them with. So I'm going to go with a Benn TKO in round 9. I think he's going to win via stoppage. I think it is going to be pretty brutal, to be fair, with the way that he lands the punches and actually gets him out of there. I think he could, like I say, just walk him onto a big straight to where Prograis gets caught out by the explosiveness. Again, similarly to how he got dropped from Catterall, but just in a bit more of a dramatic fashion. And it could be Benn actually returning to stoppage ways after, of course, he dropped Eubank in the second fight, but then prior to that, he hadn't dropped a fighter in a little while post his drug kind of debacle issues in which he had. So again, I think this could be Conor Benn going out there and getting a good stoppage. And now, will he kind of solidify himself as a welterweight, or will he try and move up to super welterweight? Again, we'll have to wait and see. But who he could actually go on to fight again is just very tricky with Zuffa at the moment. There's fighters like Catterall versus Giasov. That fight would be a great fight. If Giasov wins, maybe Giasov will sign with Zuffa, and that could happen. But I would love to see Catterall versus Benn, but that probably won't happen now with Matchroom and, Conor Benn working together. Romero, Garcia, Benn's been going back and forth with these and having face-offs with these, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Of course, they're going to have to give up their belt most likely when they sign with Zuffa, so will they be willing to do that? I don't know. And also, Barboza Jr. as well could be a good fight. Barboza Jr. had a good kind of return win against Kenneth Sims, but he's with Golden Boy. So again, it's tricky with Zuffa kind of already, not really having the connections with the other promoters, what's going to happen with them. But of course, they've shown that they are willing to sign big fighters and stir things up. So again, it will definitely be interesting. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video. If you didn't, like the video, subscribe if you're new. And thanks for watching.